Before recorded history, our ancestors built walls that charted entire continents. These were not mere barriers, but sophisticated mapping systems, carved into the earth itself. They encoded celestial paths, territorial boundaries, and the very flow of water into the landscape, creating a living atlas long before paper maps existed. By the end of this journey, you will understand how these forgotten structures fundamentally shaped human knowledge of our world. Why would a civilization invest generations in a wall that seems to lead nowhere? What hidden message was etched into a serpentine mound that twists for over 1,000 feet? We will uncover the secrets of these ancient cartographers. What does it mean to truly map a world without a single written word? That first stone placed to mark a hunting ground was more than a boundary, it was a revolution. For countless generations, early humans moved with the seasons, their world defined by migratory paths and temporary camps. But when some groups began to settle, planting seeds and building lasting shelters, their relationship with the land transformed entirely. The abstract wilderness around them needed to become a defined home. This fundamental shift from a nomadic existence to a settled life created an urgent, new need, the need to permanently mark territory. These initial walls were profound symbolic declarations. A line of stones or a raised earth bank shouted to the world, "We are here, this place is ours, it provides for us." They were expressions of community identity and control over vital resources like water and fertile soil. Experts in ancient societies suggest these simple markings were humanity's first courageous steps in a monumental journey, the journey to map our environment. It was the process of turning the unknown, intimidating vastness of a continent into a known, defined, and manageable territory. This foundational practice of marking the earth laid the essential psychological and physical groundwork for everything that would follow. The small tribe defining its streamside village evolved into the civilization that would conceive of mapping entire landscapes with stone and earth. This growing sophistication in how humans interacted with their world leads us directly to the first truly grand-scale implementations of this idea, where mapping the land became inseparable from shaping its very soul. Deep within the Amazon rainforest, a startling truth lies hidden under the dense green canopy. For centuries, this vast wilderness was seen as a place untouched by large-scale civilization. But recent archaeological discoveries have completely overturned that idea. Advanced technology that can peer through the leaves has revealed something extraordinary. The ground itself is etched with immense geometric patterns, vast networks of earthworks and walls that form a colossal, hidden map. These structures, some dating back more than 2,000 years, tell a story not of a pristine wilderness, but of a profoundly managed and engineered landscape. These were not walls built for defense in the traditional sense. Instead, they formed ceremonial centers, marked territorial boundaries, and created sophisticated grids for managing water and agriculture. Imagine a society so in tune with its environment that it carved a living atlas directly into the earth. The precision and sheer scale of these geoglyphs is what truly stuns researchers. They point to a highly organized, complex society that possessed an advanced understanding of the land long before any European contact. These walls were a way of coding vital information into the landscape itself. They mapped the location of sacred sites, the flow of life-giving water, and the most fertile soils for growing food. This was a sustainable, long-term system for living in harmony with a challenging environment. The discovery forces us to reconsider what a map even is. It was not a drawing on a piece of paper or bark. It was the world itself, sculpted and arranged to be read and understood by those who lived within it. Every raised embankment, every dug ditch was a line on a grand three-dimensional chart of their entire world. This raises a compelling question. If a society in the Amazon could accomplish this, could the same principle have been at work in other ancient cultures on other continents? Could the idea of the landscape as a map be a universal human impulse? This notion draws our gaze across the globe to another hemisphere where a very different culture built its own enigmatic walls into the face of a mountain. Across the American continent, another profound layer of this ancient mapping tradition was taking shape. In the rolling hills of what is now Ohio, a colossal serpent made of earth uncoils for nearly a quarter of a mile. This is the Great Serpent Mound, a breathtaking earthen wall that does not simply occupy the land. It seems to converse with it. Its head aligns with the summer solstice sunset, while its coiled tail may point to the winter solstice sunrise. This was not an isolated creation. From the upper Mississippi River Valley to the Great Lakes, indigenous cultures built thousands of effigy mounds in the forms of bears, birds, turtles, and other powerful figures from their worldview. These were not mere monuments or simple burial sites, though some hold that sacred function. They were a sophisticated form of landscape cartography, a way of writing a complex message upon the earth itself without a single written word. Each animal shape was a symbol, a chapter in a vast open-air library. A bird effigy might map the path of migratory flocks, while a water spirit mound could mark the location of a sacred spring or a predictable flooding zone. The walls of Earth defined a cosmological map, directly connecting the earthly realm with the cycles of the heavens and the rhythms of the natural world. They encoded celestial events, seasonal changes, and spiritual beliefs into the very contours of the earth. For the people who built them, these mounds provided a permanent, three-dimensional guide. They were navigational aids, ceremonial centers, and a constant physical reminder of their place within a living, structured cosmos. The serpent's winding body did not just represent a snake, it charted the sinuous path of a nearby river, the underground movement of water, or perhaps the celestial river of the Milky Way. This practice demonstrates a truly unified vision of the world, where mapping the land was inseparable from mapping the sky and the spirit. It prompts a fascinating question. If cultures in the Americas were aligning their earthworks with the stars, how universal was this desire to connect the earth to the cosmos? Our search for these celestial maps now carries us across the Atlantic, to a windswept plain where another culture raised stones to the sky, creating a monument that may be one of humanity's most famous attempts to build a working model of the universe. The winding earthworks of the Great Serpent Mound were far from alone in their celestial conversation. Across the globe, ancient builders were turning the landscape into a vast astronomical instrument. Imagine a traveler on a windswept plain watching the sunrise on the shortest day of the year. Instead of a complex device, they simply line up two stones set into a long, straight wall. As the sun crests the horizon, its light pours directly down that stone corridor, marking the winter solstice with undeniable precision. This was not magic, it was meticulous science etched into the earth. In places like Carnac in France, thousands of standing stones form immense parallel rows stretching for miles. Their arrangement is not random. Many of these rows are aligned to the major rising and setting points of the sun and moon. They transformed the entire territory into a giant, permanent calendar and observatory. Similarly, the famous Nazca lines in Peru, those immense geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, include long, arrow-straight pathways that point directly toward the solstice sun. These structures were so much more than boundaries. They were dynamic tools for tracking time, for predicting the changing seasons essential for planting and harvest, and for navigating vast distances under the night sky. This practice reveals a profound truth about these ancient societies. They possessed a sophisticated, working knowledge of astronomy that allowed them to encode the cycles of the cosmos directly into their most enduring constructions. They created a permanent, observable map of the heavens on the ground, a map that everyone in the community could see and use. This integration of celestial mechanics with daily life and territorial organization challenges our modern perception of prehistoric science. It was not an abstract study, it was a living, breathing part of their world, woven into the very paths they walked and the walls they built. This deep connection between the land and the sky leads us to wonder about the minds behind these colossal projects. How did they conceive of such grand designs, and what tools did they use to achieve such impossible precision over such vast distances? High in the thin air of the Andes, entire mountainsides were transformed into works of art and science. Here, pre-Incan civilizations like the Tiwanaku and Weri did not simply adapt to their vertical world, they rewrote its very code. They constructed vast, interwoven networks of stone walls and terraces that cascaded down the slopes, sculpting the land into a managed and meticulously mapped environment of staggering scale. These were not isolated structures, they formed the backbone of an empire-wide infrastructure. Long, straight walls radiated outwards, connecting distant valleys and high-altitude plains. These were more than just roads, they were the visible lines on a grand administrative map, dictating the flow of goods, people, and information across hundreds of miles. The genius of this system lay in its multifunctional design. A single terrace wall did 3 jobs at once. It flattened a steep slope into arable land, it controlled the destructive flow of water during heavy rains, and it created a microclimate perfect for growing a diverse range of crops. This was geography made productive. The placement of every wall, every canal, and every storage complex was a deliberate act of cartography. It mapped the location of water sources, the sun's path across the sky, and the most stable ground for travel. This intricate knowledge allowed empires to flourish in one of the planet's most challenging environments. They turned the Andes from a barrier into a connector, a fully charted territory where every resource was accounted for and managed. The administrative mind behind this planning is almost beyond comprehension. It required a unified vision that could coordinate thousands of workers over generations, all without the wheel or a formal written script. Their legacy was a blueprint etched into the mountains, a gift of geographical wisdom that the Inca would later inherit and expand upon. This profound mastery over the landscape forces a new question. If ancient cultures could map continents with walls of earth and stone, what does our own modern reliance on fragile digital maps and satellite signals say about the permanence of our knowledge? The sun-bleached stones of the Sahel hold stories not written on parchment, but carved into the earth itself. Across vast stretches of West Africa, from Senegal to Gambia, great circles of standing stones rise from the ground. For generations, these formations were seen as simple burial markers, but their true purpose was far more profound. They were the anchors of an ancient, living map. Each circle, often centered around the resting place of a respected elder, marked a point of social and political gravity. The size and arrangement of the stones spoke a silent language, denoting clan territories, trade agreements, and sacred spaces. A traveler moving through this landscape was not wandering blindly. They were navigating a carefully charted social and political world, reading the stones to understand who held authority, where alliances lay, and which paths were safe for passage. This was a cartography of community written in granite. This practice of inscribing power and memory onto the land finds its ultimate expression further south, in the great stone ruins of Zimbabwe. The majestic, curving walls of this ancient city were not just defensive barriers, they were a bold declaration. Their immense scale and sophisticated, mortar-free construction projected the authority and organizational power of a vast kingdom. The walls delineated the sacred hill of the rulers from the areas of the artisans and the wider community, creating a three-dimensional map of social hierarchy and economic function. They guided trade caravans from the coast to the interior, marking a capital that controlled the flow of gold and ivory across the continent. These African stone systems reveal a universal truth about these ancient maps. They were not just about physical geography, they were about human geography. They charted the invisible lines of kinship, power, and belief. The landscape itself became a durable record of cultural identity, a story passed down not through written texts, but through the oral traditions that gave meaning to every stone and every wall. The memory of the community was fused with the permanence of the rock, creating a map that was both a guide for the living and a legacy for the future. This deep connection between memory, story, and stone forces us to reconsider a fundamental question. If our ancestors could build maps meant to last for millennia, what happens when that knowledge is lost and the very purpose of these walls is forgotten? The rolling green hills of Britain hold a scar that speaks of ancient kingdoms. Walking the path of Offa's Dyke, you follow a massive earthwork, a ditch and rampart that once screamed a single, powerful message: this land is mine. For over a century, this was the undeniable border between the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia and the Welsh kingdoms to the west. It was a political argument made not with words but with soil and stone. Across Europe, from the Danevirke in Denmark to the Devil's Dykes weaving through the Carpathian Basin, these linear earthworks carved the continent into a tangible map of tribal and national identities. While they offered a formidable defensive line against cavalry and raiding parties, their greater purpose was psychological. They were clear, unambiguous markers of political and ethnic boundaries, a permanent way to say you are there and we are here. Their construction required a staggering communal effort. To build a dike stretching for dozens of miles demanded that thousands of people share a unified vision of the landscape and a collective will to define it. This was not the work of a single ruler, but the physical manifestation of a society's shared identity and its determination to protect it. These earthworks mapped the political fragmentation and shifting alliances of pre-medieval Europe in a way that fragile written records never could. They show us where power was concentrated, where cultures clashed, and where fragile truces were literally set in stone. The very permanence of these structures, however, invites legend. When a wall's original purpose fades from memory, its immense scale begs for an explanation. Who but a giant, a devil, or a mythical hero could have moved such mountains of earth? This natural drift from history into myth leads us to a pivotal moment when the practical knowledge of these ancient cartographers was lost and their grand designs were misunderstood for centuries. A giant of myth, a cyclops, was said to have built walls of impossible size, not to keep out armies, but to seal away the primal chaos of the world. In the stories of ancient Greece, the walls of Troy were more than just fortifications. They were the ultimate symbol of civilization itself, a fragile barrier separating order from the terrifying unknown that lay beyond. This was not unique to the Mediterranean. Across cultures, the most formidable walls transcended their physical stone and mortar to become boundaries in the human mind, mapping our deepest fears and spiritual beliefs directly onto the landscape. The Great Wall of China, that colossal serpent of stone winding over mountains, was in folk tales just as much a defense against malevolent spirits and mythical beasts as it was against nomadic tribes from the north. It was a spiritual bulwark, a line drawn against the cosmological darkness. These mythological narratives reveal a profound truth about our ancestors. Their act of mapping was never just a practical exercise in geography. It was a way of imposing meaning and structure onto a vast, often frightening universe. By building a wall that was both a physical reality and a legendary symbol, they were creating a spiritual map. This map charted the sacred from the profane, the safe homeland from the chaotic wilderness, and the world of the living from the realm of gods and monsters. The very stones were imbued with story. turning a simple border into an epic statement about humanity's place in the cosmos. This deep intertwining of the tangible and the mythical makes us wonder, if these walls were meant to be permanent declarations, what cosmic message were they trying to send, and to whom was it truly addressed? The lifeblood of civilization has always flowed along its rivers. In the sun-scorched plains of Mesopotamia, between the twin currents of the Euphrates and Tigris, survival itself depended on a monumental act of cartography. Here, the first city builders did not map the land with ink, but with water. They raised colossal levees and containment walls not to block the rivers, but to guide them, transforming the unpredictable, often violent floods into a predictable, life-giving network. Every canal and every earthwork barrier was a deliberate line on a living, flowing map. This map did not chart political borders, it charted the very pulse of the water itself, marking out the arteries that would bring fertility to vast fields of grain. The placement of a single sluice gate was an act of profound geographical wisdom, a decision born from generations of observing the subtle slopes of the land and the power of the annual flood. This was applied geography on a grand scale, where the walls themselves became a three-dimensional diagram of the entire watershed. The same sophisticated understanding appears thousands of miles away in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley. Their advanced drainage systems and irrigation channels, all defined by sturdy brick walls, were not just utilities. They were the physical manifestation of a master plan for managing a precious resource. In the arid landscapes of the American Southwest, ancestral pueblones constructed intricate acequias, diversion walls and canals that captured scarce rainwater and snowmelt, directing it with precision to their crops. These structures were a direct response to the map of the land, a way of writing their survival onto a dry and challenging canvas. By shaping the flow of water, these ancient hydraulic engineers were not just farming, they were actively redrawing the geographical potential of their world. They turned deserts into gardens and floodplains into breadbaskets, enabling populations to grow and cultures to flourish. This deep, functional connection between wall and water raises a pivotal question about the society that built it. How did they coordinate such vast projects, and what system did they use to track the most vital resource of all, the water that made everything possible? High in the Pamir Mountains, the wind whispers past silent stone sentinels, a caravan master guiding his laden camels along a narrow, dizzying pass does not navigate by the stars alone. His map is etched into the earth itself, a line of fortified walls and watchtowers that mark the only safe passage through a world of rock and sky. Built over centuries by empires from Han China to Sasanian Persia, these structures were far more than simple military posts. They were the glowing waypoints on a colossal, linear map of global exchange. Each fortress was a chapter in a geographic story, signaling a reliable water source, a secure resting place, or a customs station where taxes were paid and goods changed hands. Their very presence transformed an abstract web of trails into a tangible, fortified corridor, a physical chart of the most vital economic currents flowing between continents. This was a map you could not only see but inhabit, a guide that promised protection, provision, and profit. The walls did not just guard the Silk Road, they defined it, carving a permanent line of communication and control into the most formidable landscapes on Earth. They made the flow of silk, spices, and technologies visible and secure, directly shaping the political and economic destiny of entire regions for 1,000 years. Yet this practical system of waypoints and walls also projected something less tangible but equally powerful. The relentless repetition of these fortifications, stretching into the horizon, served as a constant physical reminder of an empire's reach. Their imposing scale was a statement of authority meant to awe both the traveling merchant and the potential raider, a symbol of power so vast it could rewrite the very mountains. This symbolic function of walls, built not for utility but for pure psychological impact, makes us wonder about the ultimate purpose of the most famous wall of all. What message was China truly sending when it connected these sentinels into a single, endless wall that crawled across the continent? A traveler approaching the Roman limes in Germania did not just see a fence in the woods. They encountered a stark, man-made horizon, a brutal line of wood and stone that sliced across the natural world. This was more than a barrier, it was a declaration. It communicated a simple, terrifying message to anyone who saw it. The power of Rome extends this far and no further. The empire's authority was no longer an abstract idea. It was a physical reality you could touch. The psychological impact of such a structure cannot be overstated. For a local farmer or a merchant from beyond the frontier, the wall was an omnipresent reminder of a power that could reorganize the very landscape to its will. It mapped a new reality onto the old land, imposing a rigid, imperial order over the fluid territories of tribal societies. This was cartography as an act of domination. The famous long walls of Athens served a similar, though inverted, purpose. By connecting the city directly to its port at Piraeus, these parallel fortifications created a mapped corridor of absolute Athenian control. They projected power inward, assuring the populace of their security and their connection to maritime trade, while simultaneously projecting a defiant statement of self-sufficiency and strength outward to rivals like Sparta. The wall itself was the map, a line on the ground that guaranteed the flow of money, food, and information that sustained an empire. The act of building these monumental structures was a performance of sovereignty in itself. The mobilization of thousands of workers, the consumption of vast resources, and the sheer architectural audacity were all part of the statement. A ruler who could command such a project was demonstrating a control over both nature and humanity that was itself a form of map-making. He was charting his own limitless ambition onto the earth for all to see. This symbolic cartography was meticulously designed to reinforce social hierarchies. On one side of the wall was civilization, order, and the state. On the other was the unknown, the chaotic, the other. This physical division helped solidify a collective identity for those within, creating a shared sense of us defined against a formidable them. The wall was not just a tool for navigation or defense. It was a tool for control, shaping the minds of the people as clearly as it shaped the territory they inhabited. It reveals a profound and enduring truth that every map is ultimately a reflection of the power that created it. The vast Pacific Ocean was not an empty expanse, but a network of pathways charted in the minds of master navigators. When these voyagers finally made landfall on a new island, their work of mapping was only just beginning. On the shores of Hawaii and throughout Polynesia, they began a meticulous process of turning isolated specks of land into sustainable, self-contained worlds. They did this not with grand fortifications, but with an intricate web of low stone walls. These walls snaked across the landscape, creating a living, functional map of the island's entire economy. One type of wall, the loco ia or fish pond, was a stroke of genius in coastal cartography. Builders would construct a semicircular wall of lava rock in a shallow bay, incorporating sluice gates that took advantage of the tidal flow. These gates allowed small fish to enter the pond to feed, but prevented the larger, mature fish from leaving. This was not just a wall, it was a highly sophisticated aquatic farm, a boundary that mapped the precise intersection of land and sea into a zone of abundance. Inland, another system of stone walls defined the Lai Kolo or Taro terraces. These walls carved the steep, volcanic slopes into a series of level paddies, each one a carefully managed micro-environment for growing the vital staple crop. The walls controlled the flow of water from mountain streams, ensuring each terrace received just the right amount. The entire system was a three-dimensional chart of the island's hydrology, from the rain-fed forests at the summit down to the aquaculture zones at the coast. Every stone wall was a line on a map that everyone in the community could read. It showed where the best taro grew, where the fish were cultivated, and where the sacred spaces, marked by special walls called kuahu, connected the people to their gods. This was a cartography of survival, a direct application of the same precise, observational skills used to navigate the star paths of the open ocean. They had mapped the heavens to find their way across the water, and they mapped the earth stone by stone to ensure they could thrive upon it. This holistic vision, where every resource was accounted for within a closed system, represents one of humanity's most elegant and sustainable achievements in environmental mapping. It forces us to ask, in our age of global connectivity, what profound knowledge have we lost about how to truly map and manage the self-contained world of our own local environment? The silence of Karnak is a language all its own, spoken through the countless granite stones that march across the French landscape in eerie, perfect rows. This is not a random collection of boulders, it is a massive, organized diagram rendered in stone. Neolithic communities across Europe were engaged in a monumental act of cartography, raising megalithic enclosures, circles, and long processional avenues that transformed the wilderness into a mapped and meaningful cosmos. The immense effort required to move and erect these stones speaks of a shared vision so powerful it could coordinate generations of labor. These structures were not just monuments, they were a permanent, three-dimensional record of a community's entire world. They mapped territorial claims, creating visible boundaries between the lands of different clans. They charted astronomical pathways with specific stones and corridors aligned to the solstice sun or the cycles of the moon, turning the ground into a giant celestial calendar. And they defined sacred geography with long stone rows guiding ceremonial processions that reinforced social order and spiritual beliefs. This was a map carved from the very bones of the earth, a testament to a society's understanding of its place within the natural and cosmic order. It predates the first written maps of the region by thousands of years, proving that the impulse to chart our world is far older than the written word itself. What profound knowledge of geometry and astronomy did these early mapmakers possess to plan such precise and enduring designs? While stone sentinels stood for millennia, other maps were written in sand and snow, designed to be erased by the very seasons they charted. For the nomadic pastoralists of the Mongolian steppe, a wall was not a permanent declaration but a temporary agreement with the land. Each year, they built circular enclosures known as curie from brush, felt, and earth, corralling their vast herds of horses and sheep. These ephemeral walls defined a temporary territory, a mobile home mapped onto the grasslands for a single season before being dismantled and moved. This was a dynamic, living cartography, responsive to the availability of water and fresh pasture. The knowledge of where to build the next kraal or how to construct a winter enclosure from packed snow was a precious oral map passed from elder to child. It was not etched in stone but woven into songs, stories, and the collective memory of the community. This practice reveals a profound truth about human adaptability. Mapping is not always about permanence, it is about precision within a cycle. The herder's mental map included the blooming time of certain grasses, the migratory path of game, and the hidden locations of life-saving water holes. Their temporary walls were the physical manifestation of this deep, intimate knowledge, a way of charting a sustainable path through a vast and demanding landscape. This fluid approach to territory challenges our modern fixation on fixed borders and permanent structures. It asks us to consider what we lose when we forget how to read the land's subtle, shifting cues. If our ancestors could navigate continents with maps made of stories and seasonal brushwood, what essential connection to our own environment have we left behind? From high in the air, the Nazca Desert reveals its secrets. The famous hummingbird and spider are merely focal points in a far grander design. This entire plateau is a sprawling canvas of straight lines, perfect trapezoids, and immense geometric shapes, all connected by a web of cleared pathways and low earthen walls. For decades, the view from above defined these geoglyphs, but their true purpose was grounded in the human experience of walking the earth. This was not a map to be seen, but a map to be lived. Researchers now believe this entire complex formed a massive ritual landscape, a sacred geography that the Nazca people navigated with their own footsteps. The long, straight lines acted as ceremonial pathways, guiding processions from one sacred space to another. They connected ceremonial plazas with distant water sources, mapping the most vital spiritual and practical coordinates of their world onto the desert floor. Imagine walking one of these lines, your path dictated by the ancient design. Your journey itself becomes a form of prayer, a physical participation in a cosmic order. The very act of moving along these channels was a way of activating the map, of connecting with the deities believed to control water and fertility in this arid land. The trapezoids and rectangles may have served as gathering spaces for communities to conduct water ceremonies, their shapes funneling participants toward a central focus, perhaps an offering place aligned with the mountains where the rains originated. This was a deeply integrated form of cartography. It mapped the location of subterranean water, the path of the sun, and the rhythm of ceremonial life into a single, coherent system. The body's movement through this landscape was essential to reading its meaning. This challenges our most basic idea of a map. We think of a static image, a representation to be studied from a distance. For the Nazca, the map was dynamic, its full meaning revealed only through ritual procession and physical engagement. It wove the people, their beliefs, and their survival into the very fabric of the land, creating a guide to existence that was walked into being generation after generation. An ancient wall is far more than a static line on the landscape. It is a living text. Every stone holds a story, and the order in which they were laid down forms a chronological record as precise as the rings of a tree. An archaeologist carefully brushing away centuries of soil from a wall's face is not just uncovering a structure, they are reading a historical timeline written in layers of earth, stone, and repair. This scientific practice, known as stratigraphy, reveals the biography of a place. A single section might show a foundation of rough, locally quarried rock, followed by a layer of finely dressed stone imported from a distant territory, and finally, a hasty patchwork of rubble and mud. Each of these layers speaks volumes. The initial rough stone tells of a small, local community using what was at hand. The imported fine stone maps a period of newfound wealth and expanded trade routes, a golden age where the civilization could afford grandeur. The final, crumbling rubble tells a quieter, more somber story, a sudden decline, perhaps due to a shift in climate that made agriculture difficult, or a conflict that disrupted the society's stability. The wall itself becomes a map of time, charting the pulse of a civilization across generations. A section that was deliberately dismantled and then rebuilt with a different technique might mark a change in ruling powers or a cultural revolution. The very mortar holding the stones together can be analyzed to reveal the economic conditions of the era, whether it was a rich lime-based mix or a simple clay, pointing to times of prosperity or hardship. This physical record provides a truth that written histories, often penned by the victors, can obscure. It offers a deep time perspective on human resilience and adaptation, showing how communities responded to environmental pressures and social upheavals. The stones do not lie, they quietly map the long, slow rise of a culture, its moments of peak ambition, and its eventual, often gradual, return to the earth. This tangible connection to the deep past forces us to reconsider our own place in history. What layers are we leaving behind for future generations to read, and what story will our own structures tell about the world we built? A low whisper can travel further than a shout when the very stones are listening. Across the ancient world, some of the most enigmatic walls were not just boundaries for the eye, but maps for the ear. At sites like the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum on Malta, a subterranean complex carved from solid rock, specific chambers resonate at a precise frequency. A voice spoken in one room can be heard with perfect clarity in another, the sound carried not through the air but through the very bones of the structure. This was not a happy accident. It was acoustic architecture, a deliberate design that turned stone into a sonic lens. Imagine a sentry positioned on a long, curved wall in a remote valley. Instead of lighting a beacon, he could strike a drum, and the wall itself would focus and project the sound for miles, creating an auditory map of approaching danger. Or consider a ceremonial leader chanting within a stone circle, their voice amplified and transformed by the surrounding rocks, making it seem as if the earth itself was speaking. These acoustic properties added a profound, invisible layer to the physical map of the land. A space was not only defined by where a wall stood, but by how sound behaved within it. An echo that returned after a specific count might mark a sacred point for ritual. A spot where a whisper became a roar could delineate a threshold between the mundane and the spiritual worlds. This was a way of mapping the environment through experience and vibration, creating a guide that was felt in the chest as much as it was heard. It reveals a society that perceived its world in a deeply holistic way, where sight, sound, and sensation were woven together into a single, coherent understanding of place. The landscape was not just a silent picture to be observed, but a living, resonant body to be listened to and engaged with. This multi-sensory approach to mapping challenges our modern, vision-dominated perspective, suggesting that our ancestors navigated by ear as skillfully as they did by eye. What other unseen dimensions of their world did they chart into the stones they left behind a thorny hawthorn hedge, bursting with white blossoms in spring and laden with red berries in autumn, was far more than a simple property line. It was a living, breathing wall that grew, changed with the seasons, and hummed with life. Across medieval Europe and in cultures worldwide, people turned to the plant kingdom to build their boundaries, creating dynamic maps from living wood and leaf. A farmer planting a hawthorn hedge was not just marking the edge of his field. He was initiating a partnership with nature that would require careful stewardship for generations. These botanical barriers were multifunctional wonders. Their dense, interwoven branches were a formidable deterrent to livestock and unwanted visitors, often more effective than a crumbling stone wall. Yet within that defensive thicket was a mapped pharmacy and pantry. The same hawthorn offered berries for jellies and leaves for herbal remedies. In the Americas, towering walls of prickly pear cactus served a similar purpose, their juicy pads providing emergency nourishment and moisture in arid lands. This was a form of cartography deeply woven into the rhythm of daily life. The very choice of plant species mapped the local climate and soil conditions onto the territory. A thriving hedge of a particular shrub silently announced that the land here was well drained and received ample sun. Its growth pattern and health became a living report on the environmental state of the place it enclosed. This introduced a profound temporal dimension to the map. A stone wall might last for centuries, unchanging, but a living wall was a map in constant flux. You could read the passage of years in the girth of its trunks and the succession of plants that took root within its shelter. It budded in spring, marked by the nesting of birds, flowered in summer, and dropped its leaves in a clear cartographic statement of the autumn, its bare branches revealing new sight lines across the winter landscape. This was not a static imposition of human will upon the earth, but a symbiotic dialogue. The hedgerow did not just take from the land, it gave back, creating a rich ecosystem for insects, birds, and small mammals. It mapped the intersection of human territory with the wild, not as a stark line of division, but as a blurred, fertile borderland where both could thrive. This organic approach to mapping suggests a different kind of knowledge, one based on patient observation and a deep understanding that to chart the world, you must first learn to listen to its living language. The ground beneath your feet holds a secret world, a mirror image of the surface carved from darkness and stone. Deep in the heart of Cappadocia, entire cities were hollowed out from the soft volcanic rock, their walls defining not rooms but entire hidden communities that could shelter thousands. This was not mere excavation, it was a profound act of subterranean cartography. The layout of these labyrinthine complexes was meticulously planned, often reflecting the map of the world above. A main artery tunnel functioned as a buried street, branching into smaller passages that served as neighborhoods, leading to chambers mapped out as homes, stables, wineries, and churches. Their design followed the hidden logic of the geology itself, tracing veins of softer rock for easier digging and avoiding unstable faults. This created a perfect negative image of the surface, a three-dimensional map of a society's entire functional needs, all rendered in reverse within the earth. These underground walls provided more than just shelter from the harsh sun or invading armies. They created a stable, climate-controlled environment for storing precious food and water, ensuring survival through seasons of hardship. Sacred spaces were also carved into this deep silence, their walls adorned with fading frescoes, mapping a spiritual geography safe from the turmoil of the world above. This vertical expansion reveals an astonishingly comprehensive understanding of the total habitat. These ancient builders were not just mapping the horizontal plane of their territory, they were mastering the vertical dimension, utilizing the very crust of the planet as a living component of their civilization's blueprint. Their world was not merely what lay on the surface, but the immense protected space they had mapped and sculpted beneath it. This mastery of the underground forces us to reconsider the very scale of ancient landscapes. If a civilization could double its living space by building down, how did this profound connection to the Earth's interior shape their identity and their sense of security in an unpredictable world? Walking through the gates of Mohenjo-Daro was an education in social order. The city did not sprawl randomly. It was a meticulously planned diagram of power, with its most striking feature being a towering, raised citadel separated from the lower town by massive brick walls. This was not merely an architectural choice, it was a three-dimensional map of the entire society. The elevated citadel, with its grand baths and spacious storerooms, housed the ruling and priestly classes. Below, the lower town was a dense grid of smaller, uniform houses for artisans, merchants, and laborers. The walls themselves were the key lines on this social map. They controlled not just defense, but movement and visibility. Access between the upper and lower city was funneled through specific, easily monitored gates, making the act of passing from one zone to another a daily reinforcement of one's place in the hierarchy. The height of the walls around the citadel served a dual purpose. They provided security while also physically manifesting the social elevation of those within. This urban design was a powerful, silent language that every inhabitant understood from childhood. Your address, the walls you passed daily, and the gates you were permitted to use all mapped your status, your profession, and your role in the community. This principle of using walls to chart social structure was perfected in ancient Chinese capital cities, which were often designed as perfect squares within squares. The outermost walls enclosed the commoners and markets. Inside, another set of formidable walls surrounded the administrative district and the homes of officials. At the very heart, protected by the tallest and most imposing walls of all, lay the Imperial Palace, a city within a city. This concentric layout was a physical manifestation of the Confucian ideal of social harmony, where everyone had a designated place. The city itself became a tool for maintaining control. its very streets and barriers making the abstract concept of class into a tangible, unavoidable reality. You did not need a written law to know your station. You simply had to navigate the mapped space of your own city. This architectural enforcement of order reveals a profound truth about these early urban centers. They were not just collections of buildings, they were machines for social organization, using walls as their primary mechanism to create a legible, stable, and controlled world. A pilgrim's journey did not begin at the temple steps, but at the city's edge where a straight, white road of packed limestone stretched toward the distant jungle heights. This was the Sakbi, the Maya's ceremonial causeway, and to walk its length was to traverse a map of the cosmos. Flanked by low, smooth walls, the path was a rigid line of order cut through the chaos of the wild. These bordering walls did more than prevent a stray foot from slipping into the undergrowth. They framed the entire spiritual experience, focusing the traveler's gaze and mind forward toward the sacred destination. Every step was a deliberate movement along a predetermined route, a physical progression through a symbolic landscape designed to prepare the soul for an encounter with the divine. The journey itself was the ritual. The walls and the path they enclosed created a controlled narrative, moving the pilgrim from the profane world of daily life in the city, through a transitional space of purification, and finally to the temple complex, the axis where the human realm touched the world of the gods. This was not simply a walk in the jungle, it was a walking prayer. The very straightness of the Sakbi was a profound statement. It mapped a direct, unbreakable connection between the community and its spiritual heart, a line of power that could not be swayed. This physical connection reinforced a cosmic truth for everyone who walked it, that their city was not an accident of geography, but an intentional part of a grand, sacred design. How does such a tangible journey reshape a person's understanding of their place in the world? It transforms the landscape from a collection of hills and trees into a living scripture, where every stone wall and white road tells a story of connection between the earth and the heavens. A line of stones vanishes into the undergrowth, a skeletal map of a kingdom that never was. These are the ghost limbs of history, the walls that were never finished. From remote stretches of the Great Wall where the stonework simply stops, to the great serpentine earthworks in North America that fade into the flatlands, these abandoned projects are perhaps the most honest maps of all. They do not chart a completed vision, but a moment frozen in time, a grand ambition interrupted. An unfinished wall is a snapshot of a society at a crossroads. Its abrupt end marks a precise point where the political will faltered, where the treasury ran dry, or where a sudden conflict redirected all resources and labor to a more immediate threat. These fragments map the limits of an empire's power, not its extent. They tell a story of a changing climate that made a region unsustainable, or of a new technology, like the cannon, that rendered a generation of defensive architecture suddenly obsolete. To stand before one is to witness a historical transition carved directly into the earth. The planned route of the wall, still visible as a cleared path or a foundation trench, maps a future that never arrived. It shows us the direction a civilization intended to grow, the borders it hoped to secure, and the threats it feared most. The very reason for its abandonment becomes a crucial piece of historical evidence, often more revealing than the story of a successfully completed structure. These ruins remind us that our attempts to map and control our environment are always a conversation with forces beyond our command. They are a humbling testament to the fact that every map, no matter how grand, is ultimately a provisional draft, subject to the unpredictable tides of time. What does it mean when the map itself becomes a ruin, and what forgotten futures are still written upon the land? The line between England and Scotland is not just a political agreement, it is a ghost in the landscape. This modern border still whispers the path of Hadrian's Wall, a Roman frontier built nearly 2,000 years ago to divide the empire from the northern tribes. That ancient line of stone and turf, meant to control movement and tax trade, has never truly faded. It fossilized into a cultural and administrative boundary that later kingdoms would inherit and reinforce, proving that some walls never completely fall, they simply change their form. This phenomenon is not unique to Britain. Across the globe, the invisible lines we take for granted on modern maps often follow the physical lines our ancestors built into the earth. A straight county road in the American Midwest might run precisely along the route of a prehistoric animal drive, a lane defined by low stone walls used for guiding bison herds. A property line in rural France might mirror the exact curve of a medieval hedgerow planted to mark the edge of a lord's domain. These ancient walls created the first permanent paths of least resistance, the first durable templates for how to move through and divide a territory. Later settlers and surveyors, often unaware of the original purpose of a worn-down earthwork or a line of old stones, would naturally follow these clear, pre-existing features in the landscape. They were simply using the most logical and visible markers available, unknowingly locking an ancient map into a modern deed or a national treaty. The decisions made by a prehistoric farmer stacking stones to mark his field, or a tribal chief ordering a defensive dike built, have rippled through centuries. Their physical acts of mapping created a subconscious geography that we still navigate today. This enduring influence reveals a profound truth about human organization. Our contemporary world of states and borders is not a clean slate, but a layer built upon a much older, deeply engraved palimpsest of stone and soil. The past is not just something we study. It is a line we cross on our daily commute, a boundary we see on a screen, a permanent mark left by the first cartographers who dared to draw a line upon the earth. Our journey across these continents and millennia brings us to a profound conclusion. These ancient wall systems were never merely barriers of stone or earth. They were humanity's first and most ambitious maps. They charted territories, traced the flow of water, tracked the cycles of the heavens, and even sketched the invisible lines of social order and spiritual belief directly onto the skin of the earth. From the colossal geoglyphs of the Amazon to the political dykes of Europe, these constructions reveal a universal human drive, a deep-seated need to understand our world, to organize it, and to leave a permanent mark that whispers we were here. They challenge our modern, narrow definition of a map. A map is not only a paper chart or a digital screen, it is any enduring system that encodes spatial knowledge, whether written in stone, etched into a desert, or woven into a living hedge. Reflecting on these monumental achievements, we gain a deep appreciation for the sheer ingenuity of our ancestors. They possessed a holistic wisdom, seeing the land not as a blank slate, but as a living document to be read, engaged with, and respectfully inscribed. This exploration invites you to look at the landscapes around you with new eyes. The gentle ridge in a field, the old stone wall snaking through a forest, the very layout of your own town. What forgotten maps might lie hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be read? We would love to hear your thoughts. Which of these ancient wall systems do you find most fascinating? Share your discoveries in the comments below and subscribe to continue unraveling the profound mysteries of our shared past.